Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the Craft to Career podcast. I am having a guest on the podcast, Linda. Okay, I think I'm saying her last name right, and I should have double checked when I was chatting with her. Pacini. She works with Baby Lock, and I recently went out to visit Baby Lock. I invited myself, if you've been around here for a little bit, that's trend. I've done that with other companies and people, and I just said, hey, could I come out? I would like to be there at the headquarters and learn a little bit more about the machines. I've got some specific questions. I have a quilt. There were things I was like, can I just come? And Linda was the person who sat at a machine with me, taught me how to sew not just a zipper, but 3 kinds of zippers, and taught me many things about my sewing machine that I hadn't utilized before. So Linda and I also chatted in her office. She told me a bit about her life and how she got this job. And it was very, very motivating. Linda, in and of herself, when I first saw her step out of her car, she was in this cute little dress and just looks very put together and professional and just carried herself in a way that really made an impression on me in a good way. And so I reached out and I said, hey, could Linda be a guest on the show? I would love for her to share that story that she shared with me of how she got this job, what her life kind of looked like that led up to this, and just a little bit about what she does at Baby Lock. Before we do that, if you have not left a review for the podcast, please take just a moment to do that. If you're an Apple, you scroll down to the bottom of this show. It says ratings and reviews. You can tap to rate. There's 5 stars there. You choose how many stars you want to give. And then underneath that, there's a little in purple, it says write a review, and you can tap to write a review. And I'm going to read a review that was left just recently. It's from Need a Diet Coke, which love the name. Longtime listener, Need a Diet Coke says, I've been listening for a couple of years, but I can't stop thinking about the episode with Mary Davis and the summit she created. I love hearing all the different ways people are finding success, especially in the quilting industry. So thank you, Need a Diet Coke. Today, this is another podcast episode where you are going to hear about people finding success in the quilting community. So take just a moment to leave a review. I'm close to 300 reviews. So that is my next goal, is to just get to 300 reviews. So if you've not left one yet, please do that. And now let's meet Linda. Linda, thank you so much for being here on the Craft to Career podcast. For my listeners, can you just briefly introduce who you are and what you do in the quilting community?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me, Elizabeth. I am the Director of Training and Education for Baby Lock Sewing Machine brand. And in my capacity, I work very closely with the people that create all the content that helps people have a great user experience when they take home a Baby Lock machine.
How does one like yourself become qualified for that? There's so much to learn with Baby Lock.
Well, I'm laughing to myself because I frequently jokingly say, like, I don't know how I got this job, but I'm sure happy that I have it. I think that for me, what was probably the biggest contributor was that Baby Lock is owned by a company in St. Louis, Missouri called Pacini Corporation. And I am a native of the St. Louis area. And so working in the sewing industry, it gave me exposure to the company. And I was really fortunate that they reached out and offered me a position, but it's a long story before I got there. But anyway, that's how I ended up getting here. I learned a little bit more about sewing, the sewing community, our products every single day. And I think that that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about my job is that it's not boring and there's something to learn all the time.
It's true. Well, and it's creative that way. Like, well, when I came out to visit Baby Lock, you were very hands-on teaching me. I mean, you're probably sewing and using the machines pretty much every day, every work day.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because a lot of times when you work in a corporate environment, as you get closer to your destination, for me, talking about like, oh my gosh, I work for Baby Lock. I'm right there in the thick of it all. A lot of times your daily job does not really involve touching a machine for the vast majority of the people here. For me, blessedly, I do get to do that. And I do think that sometimes people create their jobs. So you gravitate to the things that you do good at, and you also gravitate to things that you love. And so I absolutely adore sewing. And if I'm not doing something creative here at the office, when I go home, that's what I go to.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I do want you to share your story of how Talkney Baby Lock found you. But even when I first met you, I remember like you're very put together. You had done some marathons, and I actually just did a half. I was very motivated after meeting with you. You're like, I just like the discipline of it. I was like, the discipline. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Like, so rewind. And if you can tell us kind of, from the beginning, how this job opened up for you.
Oh, yeah. That's really great. So I grew up in a family of 6 girls, and my mom sewed for us, not because she found it to be a great creative release. It was a necessity. And we were private school educated. I'm a devout Catholic. And so we went to a Catholic school where you wore uniforms. And so my mom made our uniforms and really made most of our clothing as well. It was a considerable cost saving for her, right? And so as I continued through my 12 years of Catholic education, I did have a couple opportunities where I needed to make like a cheerleader's uniform. And then one time I was a pom-pom girl. Anyway, my mom looked at me and said, honey, I'm not making those. Like, you're going to have to make your own stuff, which I was like shocked because I thought, I don't know how to sew, but I think in retrospect, that kind of like planted a little bit of a seed, like, yeah, anything is possible if you want it badly enough. And so, I got married fairly young and started having a family fairly young. And when I quit my career, which at that time I was working in the banking industry, and when I decided that I was going to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom, the people that I work with laugh because they know how busy I always am. Anyway, after a year of figuring out how to take care of an infant, I mastered that, right? And then I thought, okay, I got to find something else to do. So why not buy a sewing machine? So that was my very first machine. I bought a Sears Kenmore. And within a very short amount of time, I was really creating a lot of garments and found that I had a gift for it. So I'm grateful for just being in the presence of my mom and watching the things that she did. And although she didn't really instruct me a lot, I learned a lot. And I come from a sewing family, which I didn't really appreciate or understand. But as I continued my sewing journey, realized that my grandmother on my dad's side was quite an accomplished seamstress and did a lot of beautiful hand embroidery. So I think I'm always channeling her a little bit when I sew.
That is cool. And I'm with you on taking for granted until recently that it is a skill to be able to use your hands and sew. Like, it's not super difficult for me, but for others it really is. And I also come from a line of people who really use their hands and artistic, creative. And so it is. Now, I do remember, if you can talk a little bit about, you were on a sales floor and someone from Talkney saw you. Can you remind me that part of your story?
Oh, yeah, sure. So my journey, I ended up having 4 children before I had a pause. But anyway, I went back to work before I had my last daughter, right? So I went back to work and I started working in a local sewing store. And I went there just simply to start teaching sewing classes. and my kids were getting a little bit older. I thought I got to find something to do. And by the way, I had sewed so much for myself. Then I started sewing for other people. Then I started doing home decor sewing. Then I started doing upholstery. I mean, I just continued to like add new skill sets. And so as I did that, I was a voracious sewer. I think that that's really how I kept my sanity, because I do love my kids, but I find that I really need that little bit of something from me every single day. And so it was kind of a selfish thing. But again, I mean, it benefited so many people, so I don't feel guilty about it at all. And it launched my career at that point, right? So anyway, so I'm working at a store, and just by way of sharing good sewing tips, I realized that like I was starting to sell a lot of machines for the store. And so over the course of the next several years, I kind of continued to change jobs and changing roles, and eventually found myself, fortunately, getting an opportunity to run a sewing store here in the St. Louis area from a family that had a very well-known business called Eunice Farmer Fabrics. And Eunice used to write a nationally syndicated column that was picked up by the Associated Press. And so she did that for years. So I got to meet Eunice and work with her, but I ran a sew and vac. And so I solidly started running the store in 1999. And when I did that, I didn't really understand the significance of it, but that store was actually a concept store for Pacini Corporation. And I carried in that store all products that were sold by Pacini. So again, I mean, I knew about Baby Lock maybe just a little, but it wasn't a household name machine by any stretch of the imagination at that time. And in fact, they had very few machines in their line. Anyway, so the store that I opened was a concept store for them. I ended up becoming very good friends with the director of new business for Pacini. His name was Randy Weber. Anyway, so we carried Baby Lock and Elma sewing machines, and actually a lot of vacuum cleaners, and that's my other love. I love vacuum cleaners. So like, you need a vacuum cleaner if you're going to sew. Yes. You don't need as many vacuum cleaners as I own, but they're kind of like sewing machines to me. You know, I think you need the right tools to do the right job. So it was there that I got a chance to really meet the Pacini family. We did an open house. I think that maybe was the story that I shared with you. I was doing an open house before we actually opened the store. And so the principals at Pacini came to the store just to kind of see how it looked in the layout. And I come from an Italian family, and my love language is doing things for people. So I made all of my grandmothers and great-grandmothers Italian cookies, and I had them all there. And when Ken Pacini, who is the second generation owner of Pacini Corporation, ate some of the cookies, he looked at me and said, "All right, where'd you get these?" And I said, "I'll tell you if you sign my guest book." Anyway, it started a relationship with the company in a real personal way. And I have to tell you, I mean, at Pacini and Baby Lock, we really are a family business. And I think that that's one of the things that I adore about this company. You know, I feel like when I finally took the role here, and that was, you know, in 2007, so a number of years had passed anyway, I got here and I realized just the incredible caliber of the people that work here. And so I'm very proud to be a Pacini associate. I'm super happy about what we do with Baby Lock as a brand, because we're not just a machine company. We are a company of people that are every bit as passionate about sewing as the people who use our products.
Yeah, well, and I love the machine. I mean, my story, I had different machines in the past, and I kept reaching out to Baby Lock after I got a Baby Lock. I was like, "Oh, this is such a great machine. Like, could I please, you know, be an ambassador for this?" Which I just wrote down how the like phonetic Taconi, because I'm pretty sure I was saying Taconi. So
that's okay. It's spelled like Taco, New York, right?
Yes.
Taco and then NY. So we kind of talk about that a little bit here in kind of a funny way. Yeah, Taconi is how it's pronounced.
Okay. So now, can you describe who you're working with outside? I mean, I guess that anyhow, what's your role and what does that look like with Baby Lock?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in my role as director of training and education, I'm actually events is at the end of that as well. So training, education, and events. When we internally talk about training, we talk about our retailer network and how we keep them trained on how to appropriately use and sell our product. And then when we talk about education, it's our outreach directly to the consumers that use our product. Right. And so focusing on those two different groups, I would say that the language is not really significantly different. But if I was a customer looking for a machine and I walked into a store, I would have a level of expectation that the people that are showing me the product really understand how it's going to solve problems for me. Because I do believe that, like I said, I believe sewing machines are tools. I think you should buy the best tools possible because they're going to last you for a long time. And you want to learn how to get proficient using that best quality equipment. And so for me, we host full line retailer training here in St. Louis 4 times a year with the people that I work with on my team. And we give our retailers hands-on experience about our product and help them really understand it so that when you as a customer walk into their store, you've got somebody who knows what they're doing that's showing it. So we create a tremendous amount of educational material for our retailers, and that those materials in turn really benefit the people who are ultimately using the product. And I have to tell you, the world of training and education since I came on has changed dramatically. When you think about it, the significance of a cell phone back in 2007 is markedly different. Like, right, you had a flip phone and you'd have to type on that keypad. Anyway, If you put one of those in front of me today, I wouldn't be able to use it. But today, you can walk up to a machine, you can FaceTime with somebody, you can show them something. So I think that in a wonderful way, because sewing is such a visual craft, we are able to really teach best practices and help people get successful. So, you had mentioned to me, like I had a vast amount of knowledge about sewing, and I do, but I have to tell you, it was born through a lot of frustration and tears and successes and failures. And I think that's why I'm good at my job. And it's because I've made every mistake in the entire world that you could ever make. And I mean, normally if I'm going to make a mistake, I do it in front of a whole lot of people because of what I do for a living. And you have to have a sense of humor about the whole thing because that's just life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've watched a lot of your videos and such, and the reality is that there's no police that gets to judge. You get to learn and grow. What was success for me in past years is not success for me today, because I like to continue to grow and learn. And I think that that's what is so beautiful about sewing as a hobby, and it's because you get to learn at your own pace. You get to gravitate towards what you like. If there's a project that you're working on and you hate it, you just abandon it. Put it in a drawer somewhere, stick it in a bag. You never have to look at it again. Or you set it to the side until you feel like you want to, revisit it. So I've got a fair amount of UFOs at home.
Well, and on that topic of making mistakes, I actually, as a teacher myself, I do not mind when I make a mistake in front of my students because I've been the student and the teacher does it and it's perfect. And I'm like, mine is not perfect. Why? So I like when I see someone who is in a teaching position and they actually have an issue and how are they resolving that? I'm like, oh, that's way more real life than just
Absolutely.
Magic. It's perfect,
Yeah. No, I think that that's a huge part of good training, right? Show you what can happen and then how to solve the problem. I love fabric and sewing because everything that happens that wasn't planned becomes an opportunity to do something different. And some of my most favorite projects are ones where I made a mistake and ran out of fabric, had to go into a different direction. Maybe I had to modify something so that it would fit, and you had to be creative a little bit differently. And I think that that's the problem solving part of sewing that I really love, because I am like a problem solver by nature. Give me a challenge and I will figure it out. It may not be really quickly, but I will eventually figure it out. That's just how my brain is wired, I guess you could say.
Which as I teach people I teach people how to write quilt patterns. And I feel like a lot of people who are writing the quilt patterns are that kind of a way. They are thinking outside of the box and well, what if we do that and that? And a lot of the people who are like, no, thanks, I'll just buy the pattern. They're very follow by the rule, not just tell me what to do. And that's exactly what I'll do. So we need both kinds, but I'm definitely much more of give me a problem and I'll come up with 20 different solutions. And if that doesn't
Right.
work, I'll do something else. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I learn a lot more about my thought process when I have to start teaching somebody who doesn't have the skill set. It challenges me to do things, and like so you probably know this as well because I think that there are people who can teach. I think there are people that can do, and then I think there is that rare breed that can teach and do. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to really step outside of success and then see like what somebody is going through in order to understand like the pacing and what you should and should not say and how to continue to keep people engaged without making them feel like it's not attainable. And I think that that's what's really fun about the whole educational aspect of sewing. And I think that at Baby Lock, we've done a really good job of perfecting that way of being able to communicate. I still think that we have opportunities to message better, but it's not for want of trying. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like everybody's got a different level where they're coming in to the craft. They might be super successful and know how to do things, but they just don't know how to do it on your machine. Or
Yeah.
maybe they didn't even know there was such a thing as a circular sewing attachment and like, wow, now that made all the difference in the world. And then there's so much software now that's built into machines today, especially when it comes to embroidery, that it actually makes you a better sewer and you don't have to teach somebody, you know, where the take up lever is supposed to end when you stop at a row of stitching. So again, I mean, I think that what's so fun about sewing is that it is a continuous conversation that's never going to end. And there's always going to be something new to learn. And that makes it pretty exciting for me.
There is always something new to learn. Like there are so many different techniques and I mean, yeah, it's exciting. It feeds the creative mind, you know?
Totally. Totally. And I think that that was always the thing for me when I came to work here. And I said to the gentleman who was the president of Baby Lock at the time, I said, he was like, well, let me just see how you are at managing people. I said, we're not going to talk about that because I run a store and you've seen I have the same people working with me from beginning to end. And we were at the time one of the top 10 retailers for Baby Lock in the United States. I said, so no, my management skills aren't a question here. Here's my question for you. Are you going to micromanage me and am I going to get bored?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's what I really cared about. Like, I will tell you this, like I laughed today. I have not been bored a single day in my job. And I fortunately have been given a lot of opportunities here to take what I thought was a good direction to go in terms of education. I've been given the latitude to do it. So, a lot of fun. And I work with an incredibly creative, wonderful group of people. I think you've had Patty Marty on your podcast before, and she works alongside me and really brings our product to life for a lot of people. And so she and Mike Johns, and then I've worked very closely with Denise Schober before she went into a sales role. So there's a lot of people at Taconi that I think a lot of your listeners might be familiar with. And if they're not, check out the Baby Lock website, check out some of our Facebook communities, and you'll see these people interacting every single day. So yeah, we get all the fun, all the
Yeah.
headaches, but all the fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, okay, for my listeners who may be interested in like somehow teaming up with Baby Lock, what are the different areas that you work with people in
Oh
the
yeah,
quilting community sewing?
yeah. That's a great question. And in fact, we have people that reach out to us every day. And so we actually have a plan in place for that. So on the Baby Lock website, there is um, in the footer of our homepage, you can actually find a way to put in a request about partnering with Baby Lock. And so partnering with Baby Lock can look different depending upon what your interest is. So let's just start like the farthest out level, which would be somebody who would say, yeah, you know what? I think I'd like to run a sewing machine store. I'd like to carry Baby Lock machines in my shop. How do I go about doing that? And so there's a way to be able to get in touch with some of our outside sales reps because we do have Baby Lock retailers scattered all across the United States. And it's important to me, these small communities. So little side note, my husband and I are avid cyclists as well as I'm an avid runner, but we did RAGBRAI in 2017. It's a RAGBRAI is the Register. So Register is the newspaper. The Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. So you start on one side of the state of Iowa and you cycle all the way to the other. It was about 450 miles that year. You do it in a week. But what was the fun part about that is that, Iowa is a huge farming state, and there's a lot of little small towns. Most people don't live in big cities. The vast majority of people are scattered everywhere. And so how fun to be able to choose where you want to live and then have a local baby lock store. And so as we were meandering through the state, I stopped at 3 or 4 different baby lock retailers along the way in little towns, which was really kind of cool for me. So we have a very strong retailer network. And if somebody had an interest in seeing about becoming a baby lock retailer, you can begin your journey there. At the same time, there are people who say, hey, you know what? I've been sewing forever. I love it. I think it would be so much fun to travel and represent baby lock products. I'd like to work at big shows. Does anybody need any help like that? I want to see the world and I want to do it while I'm sewing. Let's talk about sewing. And so those are people who would be considered educators for us. And so we have a very small core group of people that are employed at Taconi for baby lock, but where we really extend our reach is through independent contractors that we work with. So a couple things to know, like if you're going to be an independent contractor, the kinds of things that we're looking for is number one, an understanding about baby lock products. So if you're great at sewing, but you don't use a baby lock machine, that really doesn't help us to see what you're capable of doing with our products. So a lot of people who are out there using baby lock products and they're thinking, oh my God, I love my baby locks. I love my sergers. I love my embroidery machine. I can make them really do great things. And I want to travel and I want to talk about sewing all day. Reach out to us and fill out that form and let us know that you're interested in a capacity like that. So just so you know, I mean, in an education capacity as an independent contractor, you get paid when you get picked up to work, right? We don't have you on a retainer in any way. But what's really nice, Elizabeth, is that the world's starting to, and I shouldn't say starting to because it has been for the past couple of years, but I think that human beings are really meant to be with each other. And I think that we're back to being in a place where most people are very comfortable being with other human beings and connecting with them and being in groups with them. And, that I never operated very well under a structure of fear. And so blessedly, there's a lot of great sewing shows going on. Baby Lock has a presence at a lot of those shows. We may not necessarily have a corporate booth, but we've got local retailers, which makes the most sense because they're serving a local community. And so sometimes we'll send an outside educator to help with big shows like that. So reach out to us from an education standpoint. And then we have people who are, I'll talk about event partners. So like the educators, that's my team. And we have event partners, and those people as well are people that we partner with. And they have a very strong proficiency in baby lock. They really understand our product. They've got a good job. They really don't need the job, but they want to partner closely with our company. So I'll say some names of some people that your listeners might recognize. Zandra Shaw with Embroider Shop. She lives in South Africa. She's a very strong event partner for us. For any of you that really like to embroider, or maybe you're interested in just seeing quick, small, attainable projects, she has a collaboration with us called Beyond the Frame. And if you just go to beyondtheframeembroidery.com, you'll see that it's a free embroidery design club. So once a month, she does a free embroidery design that you can stitch, but she teaches you how to use different stabilizers and such, right? And then we have Pat Sloan. A lot of people recognize her as kind of one of the founders of, and of course, she's been an author of a lot of books, but she Teach Me How to Quilt. She does a lot with applique and such, has a strong Facebook presence, but Pat Sloan's an event partner of ours, as is Vanessa Fromm with Fabric Confetti. We have Gudrun Erla from GE Quilt Design. She's an event partner with us. Carly Porter, she calls herself the graffiti quilter. She does long arm quilting and teaches just crazy good free motion quilting skills. She's an event partner. So these are people that already have, like I said, they don't need us. We don't need them, but we need each other, right? Mm-hmm. So we benefit one another by just tying our brand and their success together. And then the last partnership that we have, and that's where you kind of come in, is we have ambassadors. And so ambassadors are people that can reach people that we wouldn't necessarily reach. You have your own affinity groups. You reach a whole different audience. And as a brand, I think that it's really important to us to get our brand name out there. I was, well, sidebar, I always have side stories, but I was on a cruise that I won as being a top 10 retailer for Baby Lock. And I was 7 months pregnant with my youngest daughter. And we're on this cruise, and I saw a bunch of people, and they were like, okay, everywhere we look, we keep saying Baby Lock, Baby Lock. What's a Baby Lock? I said, well, it's obviously not a birth control device because 7 months pregnant. Anyway, so, but people are like, what's Baby Lock? But, I think I maybe shared this story with you, and I'll just share it because it seems appropriate to do so. But the Tacconi Corporation was founded by Nick Tacconi, and Nick was an Italian immigrant. And he actually was in the Navy around the time of the Second World War, and he won $1,500 playing craps on a boat. And he sent the money home to his wife, and he said, when I get home from this war, this is going to help us start our new business. And so he did. He started a business out of his garage, and he did a lot about distributing small machine parts and sewing machine repair parts. So probably your listeners probably know that during the time of the Second World War, all manufacturing for sewing machines left the United States. And that's because those factories were needed to kind of fuel the war machine. And that manufacturing has never come back, and it never will, really. But at that time, he was importing a lot of repair parts so that people could keep their machines going. And everybody knows the people who were sewing then, they sewed out of necessity. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really good service. But he started his business out of his garage, developed a lot of relationships. He ultimately became a distributor for sewing machines that he was importing. And along the way, he developed a lot of relationships with a lot of people that were within the sewing industry. And there were some engineers who worked at a factory in Japan who had spoken to their leadership about bringing a small overlock machine to the home sewing market. And the owners of the factory said they just didn't see that as a viable product for a consumer, right? And so they came to Nick Tacconi and said, what do you think about doing this? He said, okay, I'll buy a container full. And so a container is like a train car load, right? So he got a container full of sergers, and they called it a baby lock because it was a baby overlock machine. And so Tacconi Corporation, through Baby Lock, was the very first serger brought to the home sewing market, and that was in the mid-1960s. And that is how we got our name. And so a lot of times people talk about a tissue, and they'll say, hand me a Kleenex, right? Well, when you're in the sewing world, a lot of people that have been using sergers for a long time, they just call sergers Baby Lock. So when I ran a retail sewing store, sure, I'd have people come in and they would drop off their machine and they'd say, yeah, I need to bring my Baby Lock in for service. I was like, well, you've got a Juki. No, it's my Baby Lock. I said, no, it's a Juki branded overlock machine anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of fun, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's how we got our name. But what I think is really interesting about that is that through that relationship and the success of that, we continued to kind of develop new sergers. We've continued to innovate and bring out new sergers. Just this year, we launched the Baby Lock Applaud Creative Top Cover Stitch Machine. There is nothing like it in the entire world. I work very closely with Charlie Dupree. He's our chief engineer. He hand tools almost all of our accessory feet. He works closely with the factories that we work with to develop new products. So I get to be on the sidelines and write in all of this product development, which to me it's remarkable because if I'm living my fantasy life, let's just be honest here. I'm very involved in an industry that started off as a hobby, became a real passion. And now it's just something that's so interwoven in my life. Like my goal is to get all of my sisters to start sewing. And I've done a pretty good job. I think most of them they've at least completed one project, because when we got together for a sisters weekend one year, I brought 6 sewing machines with me. And as a surprise, everybody got to sew a reusable grocery bag. But anyway, I digress. We were talking about ambassadors. So ambassadors bring a new audience. So for people who didn't know Baby Lock, now you know the Baby Lock story, and you get to share it with your customers, and then they get to know who we are. And because you're successful, other people think they can be successful. And that's how we keep this whole ecosystem going. But we really are a company that's very involved with the community of people that use our products.
Yeah.
And happy to have you all here, actually.
Which I have felt. And I have to ask, so I found you have somehow, I don't know how I found out about it, newsletter or online, but Max, it's like he's an 8-year-old fashion designer. He's a new ambassador. How did you find him? I am loving his stuff.
Well, it's so funny because I am the least aware person. I get on social media a little bit, but like my real life just takes over most of my life. But anyway, they were talking about Max probably about a year ago. So Patty, who sits next to me, was like, have you seen this kid? He's like 7 years old and he's designing fashion. I'm like, that's the craziest thing. Like, it's got to be somebody else doing the sewing and they're just showing Max. But no, it's Max, and he's doing his thing, and he's got a huge following. So he's been sewing on a baby lock, and he works with one of our baby lock retailers in his community where he lives. Anyway, when we reached out and said, hey, Max, can we have you as one of our ambassadors? He and his family were all for it. And so, yeah, he is going to explode our brand for us, just probably in terms of exposure, because that's the kind of stuff that really makes a difference. So like everybody has probably heard of Jenny Doan and her story in Hamilton, Missouri, and how she just took this little dying community and turned it into a destination. She originally, when she brought on machines, and what she sews on is a baby lock, and she's been doing that for a long time. And so she's been an ambassador of ours for a while. I don't know that we're formally under contract with one another anymore, but I know personally that she still sews on one of our machines. She likes our Accomplish. It's the Accomplish 2 now, but it's a great machine. I actually have that machine at home as well. And yes, I do buy my own machines. I only have 16 right now.
Okay. So I have a ways to go still.
Yeah, I've given away a few. Again, I'm trying to get everybody in my family to sew.
Right.
But yeah, he's a pretty interesting little guy. And I think that he proves that there's nothing that you can't do if you want to do it. And I think it's fun to watch him because, he's working in a realm where most of us kind of look at couture and we say, oh, I'm not an Yves Saint Laurent, and I'm not, some of the other designers that are out there, names eluding me right now. But yeah, there's room for growth still. Mm-hmm. There will be a next generation of people who are driving fashion. Yeah. I'm convinced. And he's going to outlive all of us because he's
right.
only 7 years old.
Which, okay, now I'm just bringing up though, but speaking of, I don't even know if maybe she's someone maybe I could want to work with. Ford Wardrobe, I want to say. But she's another one who actually motivates me. I don't sew clothing, but she just talks a lot. She's just recently kind of started talking about the mass production of clothing and how that's polluting the world, and really encouraging people to try and make your own clothes. And that, I see it enough. I'm like, oh gosh, I should just give it a try, So yeah, she's an interesting one too.
Yeah. Garment sewing was my first love. And I think it's because I found it fascinating that you could actually make something for yourself and wear it. And there was a period of my life that I didn't wear anything that I didn't make. Okay, bras and underwear, fine. I still bought that. But I made everything, and I got good at fit and understanding color and understanding fiber and fabric. And, I am not, I like things that last for a while. I like classic clothing. It's not uncommon for me to have something that I wear for 10 years. I'm not a trendy person. I like that part of me. It's contrary to the way that things were a number of years ago. Like everybody was like, it's a new fashion style, it's a new fashion color, get it, wear it. And if you don't like it anymore, get rid of it. Right. But for me, I hang on to things because I'm emotionally attached, especially the things that I've made. And for a long time, my kids, so I got into heirloom sewing and hand smocking. I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so in the South for 10 years when I had my first 3 kids. And I really got into fine sewing. And I loved handwork because I could watch the kids and smock. and I could be present for my husband. We could watch TV together. I wasn't in the other room at a sewing machine, but I could be working on something. Like I always wanted to have something on my lap to do. But, I think that we're almost seeing like a resurgence of people coming back to the things and like being aware that everything we throw in the trash, we have to deal with that environmentally. And I think that that's always been my thing. I started recycling back in 1982 when recycling wasn't a thing.
True. Yeah.
I've been recycling for a long time, and it's because like I'm a frugal person to a lot of degrees. I like nice things, but I don't believe in like contributing to a lot of waste. And I think that, we've come from a place of a lot of mass consumerism. And I think that after a while you get sick of it because you realize that it just doesn't make you happy.
It's the opposite. Yeah.
It causes you anxiety and all that stuff. So with that being said, you're right. You can buy fine quality fabrics and make something lovely. And when you understand fit, and there's a lot of great people out there that, especially because of the internet, you can find wonderful tutorials about how to make a sloper, how to get a good fashion fit. Joy Mahan was an ambassador for Baby Lock for a long time, and she's got a really attainable series of books that teach just the basics of design. Also, Amy Barrickman has been doing sewing like that for a number of years. So there's just a lot of great people out there. And just depending upon who you run into or whose style appeals to you, I say to anybody who's listening, if you haven't made a garment for yourself ever and it feels really intimidating, go to the store and look. They make patterns today and they show every single body style and shape out there. Find you. And make that, if you can see something on somebody whose body shape matches yours and you say, you know what, maybe that's not going to be like my favorite outfit of all times, but I want to start learning here. Because in the process of taking something apart and putting it back together again, you can find a tremendous amount of peace, and you understand that this is what life is really about. It's about, reaching in deep, finding out something that you have, taking that gift of yourself and sharing it back with yourself or with your community. I've always been a very generous sewer, and for no other reason than like, I know that when I make something for somebody, that person is on my mind the entire time I'm working on that project. And so when I hand something to somebody that I've made for them, I don't say it, but in my heart, I'm like, here's a piece of me, in a beautiful way. Here is something that I made because I cared enough and I loved you enough to say that I am going to make you a big part of my day, and I'm going to give this to you when I'm done. And that's my gift of love. So that's my love language, right? Doing things for people, creating things. That is my love language. It drives my husband crazy because his love language is go out and buy something and have a shopping bag, And for me, it's like, I made you dinner. I made you breakfast. I made your coffee this morning. I cleaned the kitchen. I'm a doer.
I would love to try those Italian cookies that you mentioned.
All right. We'll make it a plan. Yeah. In fact, for Zandra Shaw last year at Christmas time, I didn't realize you can't send baked goods like that to Alaska. South Africa, and they never made it. And all I kept telling her is like that chocolate biscotti, it was the best. Just letting you know.
You'll never know, but it was
You'll
amazing.
Never know, but I promise you, they were amazing.
Oh, I love that. So I am curious, for someone who's interested in pursuing a career like yours, I mean, there's only so many positions like that, but what advice would you give someone?
Yeah, you know what? I really think that, on the periphery, it's all those things that we talked about, whether it's an ambassador role or an educator role or being an event partner role. What ends up happening is that the exposure to the people at the company, sometimes opportunities present themselves, right? And so I never set out to move into this capacity because, quite frankly, it never even hit my radar. But I would say that for anybody who's really intent upon being within a certain industry or working closely with a company, find a way to get in, even if it isn't your ideal role. Like I said, there's a woman that just recently got hired here at Taconi in an accounting role. And we were doing an orientation internally we always do presentations so that they get to understand like the largesse of the company, right? And so I did a presentation to this new group of employees, and she was in the group only to find out that she's an accomplished seamstress. And she's young and she seems really adept. And so Patty and I looked at one another and went, accounting? Really?
Right. Yeah.
Is that where she wants to stay? Maybe we could, hijack her.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, proximity is everything. If it's not attainable for you to do an educator role because you need to have a 9-to-5 job, check out a Baby Lock retailer.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised how gratifying working in a retail sewing store can be. It certainly was for me, and that was my launch board. That absolutely was. Sharing your love of sewing, whether you're good at teaching, seeing if you can teach some beginners classes, beginning sewing classes. There are more people interested in learning how to sew today than there ever has been, to the best of my knowledge. And garment sewing or quilting or bag making are just making a pair of pajama pants. I'll tell you, when my daughter's in college, my youngest is in college, she sent me a picture this weekend. It was a picture of some, boxer shorts for girls. She saw them at a shop. She said, Mom, would these be easy to make? And I was like, yeah, Lainey, those would be super easy to make. They were $22, which is a lot of money for a girl going to college, right? Because I don't give her a ton of spending money. I'm paying for her education. And so she and her girlfriend, they went and bought a little bit of fabric and they deconstructed a pair of shorts that she already owns, and they pattern traced and they made those shorts. I was so super impressed. Right. But
cool.
there's people that want to do that. So find a place where you could be around other people, and then you'll find out what your skill set is. You'll find out like, oh, maybe I'm really great at selling sewing machines. Sell Baby Lock. We'll meet each other someday. We have a very active program for training our retailers. We have an LMS. And so through that, we really I know hundreds of people, probably 1,000 people that sell our product across the United States. The shining stars present themselves, and opportunities, if it's meant to be. And I do believe that in life, everybody has this opportunity to become the best version of themselves. And so whatever that skill set is, maximize it and do your best. Some of my favorite heroes like Mother Teresa is do everything with great love, and just do whatever it is that you do and do the best at it. And so you'd be surprised. People do recognize that. I think we live in a world today where people do recognize the beauty in each other, and they're always looking for ways to be able to help one another grow. And so you'll find somebody that's a mentor. You'll find somebody who'll be a cheerleader for you and help catapult you to the next great thing that can happen in your life.
It's really beautiful and powerful to hear that, because I feel like everyone is so down and negative. The election's over. It feels so divided. But to hear like, no, the world is really good and it's full of good people.
Oh my God. Yeah. I told my husband, we listen to a lot of stuff that causes a lot of anxiety. And I told him, please just turn it all off.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then go outside.
Yep.
I start my day with a walk every day, a walk, run, right? And I go outside and guess what? It's still the same beautiful place that it was. And that's never going to change, because we are all human beings and we all have a lot of great things in common with one another, but mostly because everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to live a meaningful life and do something good with it. And so tap into that energy, make that be the most important thing for you, and you will find joy. You really and truly will, no matter what can happen. Nothing can, permeate that temple of your life as long as you're centered in what it is that you hold dear, and you make that the thing that is the litmus test of whether or not you feel like you did something good or successful that day. Find it within. Don't look for that approval from anybody but yourself. You'll never satisfy everybody, but you can satisfy yourself.
That is beautifully said. I feel like we need to wrap up on that, because that is just tie that with a bow and put my approval on that.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I think that just listening to podcasts and just understanding that there's a whole community. I am a huge podcast listener. I hope that the people who tune into this, check out our Baby Lock website. And especially if you own a Baby Lock machine, have people check out our SewEd education program. So we launched SewEd Plus just a couple months ago. So you can get a monthly subscription to our video, cancel at any time. I do a lot of the education on that site. So we've got a lot of good content that'll teach you how to get the most out of your machine. And soon we're going to be doing just basic sewing courses out there as well. And so, if you want to learn from somebody who knows how to make a mistake and fix it, I'll be there.
Yes. Well,
And we can end on that note.
Yes. I mean, I was there. You showed me how to sew multiple kinds of zippers. And I mean, I just felt like, oh, I can sew anything. So you know what you're doing. So
yeah, thank you. Well, it was a great pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me to join you. I enjoyed it completely.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for coming and being a guest on the show. Linda, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be a guest on the Craft to Career podcast and for telling us a little bit about your story. And then most beautifully, sharing just those words of encouragement about humanity at large and about us individually as people, the gifts that we each have and the talents, and to really dive deep and tap into what that is for us individually. So thank you so much, Linda. Be sure, listeners, to go check out Baby Lock. There's links in the show notes. And if you are looking for a machine, it is one that I stand by. I love my Baby Lock sewing machines. I don't have 16 yet like Linda does, but I've got 3. So we'll see. We'll see what I get next. I don't have a serger, so we'll see. But again, Linda, thank you so much for being here. And listeners, I will see you back here next Friday with a brand new episode. Take care.